upstairs to the bedroom to get his equipment. And you think of this scenario, you think of what is transpiring, you think about what had just taken place with the children crying, them trying to rush Michael Jackson to the hospital. And what he finds is Conrad Murray's up in the room alone, appears to be picking things up, and he's holding a trash bag. And he seems surprised. Paramedic Senef gets his equipment, gathers up his belongings, and goes back downstairs, leaving Conrad Murray, again, still up in the room alone. Conrad Murray, sometime shortly thereafter, then comes down the stairs, enters the rig, and is driven to UCLA with the emergency personnel. Conrad Murray, again, you'll have this photograph in evidence, and it'll be much clearer when you have it back there with you. And what you'll see depicted in this picture is Conrad Murray standing here with these beige pants and a white t-shirt. And what you'll see when you look at the photograph closer is there are these large loose cargo pants with cargo pockets on the sides. And you can actually see in the photograph, this left leg here, there's a big cargo pocket on the left side of the pant leg. You'll have an opportunity to view that photograph and draw your own conclusions. But it documents what Conrad Murray was wearing, that he had these large pockets on both sides of his pants. You also have the photographs of Conrad Murray in the viewing area. If you recall some of those photographs, black and white photographs of Conrad Murray in the viewing area where he's wearing the same clothing. So what happens at UCLA? Again, Dr. Cooper and Dr. Wynn are told between the two of them that Conrad Murray had been giving Valium and Flomax over a period of time, but when they asked specifically what had he been given this night, what have you given him, the only thing he said was lorazepam. Dr. White will tell you that he simply overlooked the propofol. He overlooked the propofol. Propofol is never mentioned, either Dr. Cooper or Dr. Wynn. They do everything they can, but it's far too late to save the life of Michael Jackson. We also learn from Michael Amir Williams and Fahim Mohammed that following the pronouncement of death of Michael Jackson, that Conrad Murray asked if he could be taken back to the home because he needed to recover some cream that Michael would not want the world to know about. They both found this odd, and they came up together with a story to say that the police had taken their car keys. That way they simply wouldn't have to involve themselves with it. They could politely say no, they have no choice. But think about the thought process of Conrad Murray at this time. What does he know? He knows his medical bags with the propofol and the other items are still in the house. He knows that People's 30 with his fingerprint on it is still at the house. He knows his 3 various medical bags, syringes, and various items are still at the house. Do you really think he was worried at that time that Michael would be concerned about a Benequin cream, that he had vitiligo and he had to use a medically necessary cream? Do you really think that was Conrad Murray's concern at that time? Conrad Murray had concerns. Conrad Murray's concern, as it was throughout this time period, was Conrad Murray. That was his concern. But they did not take him back to the house. And we know sometime thereafter, Conrad Murray left the hospital after being involved with a press release and things of that nature. He left the hospital and apparently was not seen, at least at the hospital, again that day. I want to talk about the discovery of the bags up in the cabinet. And we know that that discovery occurred as a result of Conrad Murray telling the police about it in his interview of June 27, 2009. But what's interesting to note when you listen to the audio and you read the transcript and you take into account the testimony of Detective Scott Smith, Conrad Murray went into this interview thinking the bags had been discovered. When you piece together all the evidence, Conrad Murray knew the police had been there. He knew there was eventually going to be toxicology findings. He went into this interview to get ahead of the story. He went into this interview to get his version of events out there before the police discovered it on their own, and he looked even more guilty. This was a calculated plan. He assumed the police had found those bags in that upper cabinet. So the interview takes place, but what is said? Detective Smith, where's your bag with those syringes? Where's your bag where those syringes would be at now? Mr. Chernoff, oh really? Dr. Murray, I don't have them. Mr. Chernoff, I thought you left it there. Dr. Murray, yeah, I did. Detective Smith, where? Where did you leave it? Dr. Murray, in that same bedroom, in the closet, where it always stays. Conrad Murray thought the police was already in custody of those bags. He's coming forward to this interview for the self-preservation of Conrad Murray, to get ahead of the story, to put his version out there. Unfortunately, his version doesn't match up with any of the evidence. It doesn't match up with the phone records, or the text messages, or the emails. Conrad Murray put this out there because he thought the bags had already been discovered, and he knew the toxicology findings, when linked to what was found in those bags, would show that Michael Jackson died of acute propofol intoxication coupled with the contributory effect of the benzodiazepines. I want to talk about the standard of care. Should I continue, Your Honor, through?
Please.
Okay. The standard of care, ladies and gentlemen, you heard from a number of doctors in this case. The people called Dr. Alon Steinberg, Dr. Nader Kamagar, and Dr. Steve Schaefer. Dr. Alon Steinberg is a board-certified cardiologist. Nader Kamagar is a sleep expert, critical care medicine, internal medicine, pulmonary specialist. Dr. Steve Schaefer is one of the leading anesthesiologists, an expert in pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. And you heard from this cross-section of experts who came in here and told you about the standard of care. What is needed? What are the dangers? What is required? Every single doctor that testified in this courtroom told you they would never do what Conrad Murray did. Every single doctor, because they know the death. So what did we learn? We learned that the standard of care for propofol requires a room that looks like this. A medical facility, whether it's a hospital, a surgery suite, a medical clinic, a medical facility that has the necessary equipment, that has the personnel, that has the resuscitative equipment, that has the resuscitative drugs. This is where propofol is used, not here, not in an upstairs bedroom, without any of such necessary equipment and care. So we know what propofol does, we know it's only used in a highly monitored setting, and we know without doubt from the people's experts that the setting represents an extreme violation of the standard of care. This is basic common sense. There's no backup, there's no emergency equipment. Propofol is not utilized in a bedroom. No one had ever heard of propofol being used in a bedroom ever until Conrad Murray did it to Michael Jackson. It's an egregious, extreme deviation from the standard of care. It is gross negligence, and it is a direct cause of Michael Jackson's death, the setting in which this was done. Had it been done in a hospital, you have the emergency equipment. You have what you need. You have personnel. You have airway management tools. This is criminal negligence. Criminal gross negligence. But we know there's multiple violations of the standard of care. We know it's not indicated for the treatment of insomnia. And you remember Dr. White put forth, or Mr. Flanagan asked the people's experts about this insomnia study, I believe it was out of Taiwan. And this post-dated Michael Jackson's death, number one. Number two, the authors of that study called it an experiment and it needed to be further researched. It had multiple safety precautions in place, such as all the monitoring, the fasting, the exclusion of other drugs, IRB ethical approval for the study. So it was done in a setting where it had all the necessary precautions, but the authors of that study said it's an absolute experiment and needs to be studied further. It does not create a standard of care. It didn't even exist in June 2009. Propofol is in no way indicated for the treatment of insomnia. What the experts testified to is what Conrad Murray was doing was a pharmaceutical experiment on Michael Jackson. It was an experiment. If 2010 it's studied for insomnia, if in 2010 it's an experiment, it surely was an obscene experiment on June 25th, 2009 by a doctor who has no knowledge or basis of training in sleep medicine. This is an extreme deviation. This is gross criminal negligence. Continuous medical monitoring equipment. You heard a great deal about the heart monitors that are needed, the pulse oximetry, the capnography, the blood pressure. All of these things need to be constantly monitored because we know from every expert, called by the defense or the people, that bad things can happen quickly when you're using propofol. Propofol is a wonderful drug if used appropriately. Bad things can happen quickly. Respiratory depression and death if you don't know what you're doing and you're not in the appropriate setting with the appropriate equipment. This is criminal negligence. Immediate access and the ability to use resuscitative equipment. This includes the drugs, the crash cart, defibrillator, suction apparatus, as well as the airway equipment that paramedic Blunt was able to utilize. But you don't just need to have it, you need to be able to use it. And I reference that being the ambu bag laying on the floor, which Conrad Murray never makes any mention of using. We know from the Seacoast records it hadn't even been ordered until some time, I believe in June, but you have the records back in the deliberation room. But he says he went straight to compressions and mouth to mouth, never once mentioning the ambu bag. No suction apparatus, no crash cart with the necessary drugs, no automatic defibrillator, none of the airway equipment one would need and require in order to safely manage an emergency as a result of propofol. This clearly is criminal gross negligence and extreme deviation from the standard of care. It requires continuous presence and monitoring. Abandonment of a patient, including just preoccupation with phone calls, texts, and emails, is abandonment of a patient. Leaving the room is obviously even worse. But you need constant visual observation of your patient. You do not leave your patient alone in this condition. There's a fundamental principle. If your concern is the patient's life, you do not leave them alone. That's why in the hospital setting we learn they have the backup personnel, all the audible equipment, all the equipment available, including people, including eyes on the patient, because bad things happen very, very quickly. Extreme criminal gross negligence. The contributory factor of the benzodiazepines. Again, in this setting, this only heightened the danger. In a hospital setting, you may be able to use benzodiazepines and propofol, but in this setting, everything is exacerbated. Everything is heightened. The risk of respiratory failure is heightened because the benzodiazepines are already working. They're already in the blood. You know, Dr. White talked about all these variables. The reason you take the precautions you take is because you can't always predict how an individual patient will react. You can't always predict exactly how dehydrated that patient is. You can't always predict exactly the level of the benzodiazepines at a given moment. As the defense spent a great time explaining, there are variables. That is why you take the precautions you do. You don't have time to go back after the fact to say, you know what? I should have had that emergency equipment there. It's too late. Michael's dead.